Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another tier list. Today we're taking the newest today we're taking on the newest patch, the November patch. It had a lot of interesting changes and it definitely shuffles around the hero power levels a lot. So without further ado, let's hop right into it. Abrams, they reverted the melee attack speed reduction. They gave him some more strafing thing with the shoulder charge again. Shoulder charge now carries momentum at the end of the charge, so that means you can do some more movement tech. Slightly buffed the spirit scaling on Siphon Life, and then some nerfs to resilience. Abrams has been in a pretty good spot since the beginning of this game, I think. He just has a toolkit that makes him very strong. He's like a very strong frontline brawler. He has stuns, disables. He can steal mid-boss really well with his ult. He's just got a solid kit overall. They nerfed his tankiness a little bit and gave him back his melee damage. It's also because now there's even more melee resistance in the game. So I think melee builds are not as strong as they used to be before. But I think Abrams belongs in A tier. Next up, we have Bebop. As most of you probably know, Bebop has been through a whole lot of changes. They recently removed the stacks lost on death, and then they gave back bomb stacks on kills instead of on damage like I suggested earlier. And then they also added back a little bit more stacks on damage as well. So they also rebalanced the bomb to no longer disarm but give a 30% damage penalty instead, similar to how inhibitor works. And the sticky bomb now calculates detonation time instead, which means that items like Diviner's Kevlar and Spiritual Overflow will now work even if you get the buff after you cast the bomb. So those are some nice quality of life changes. Also, removing some bomb damage on kill and giving some more bomb damage on impact means that there's a smaller gap between gun build and bomb build compared to what it's ever been probably. So now you can play bomb build at a fairly competitive level. I still think gun build is the stronger build, but the bomb build definitely works. However, there is just no getting away of the fact that if you don't hit your hook, you're pretty useless. He has a huge character model as well. And I just don't think Bebop is that strong. Even after all these changes, he's in an okay spot. But a lot of games, you're just not gonna get the stuff done. I think, just to clarify, I think Bebop is in a good spot. I just think it's the nature of how the hero works, okay? So I did put him in D tier last time. I am bumping him up to C tier, but it's just the nature of what this hero does. You completely rely on hitting the hook, and if you don't hit the hook, you're completely useless. And if you compare that to Paradox, who has a similar toolkit, there's a much bigger chance of hitting the kinetic, carbine, and the swap. So Paradox is almost better in every possible way for a team. Bebop has definitely more solo carry potential than Paradox, but overall, it's just a much worse hero. I still love him though. Still love him to death. We'll still grind Bebop. Got over 700 games. Still love him. But I gotta admit that a lot of games, I definitely noticed that he's like just not... You completely rely on hitting those hooks, which is why you start buying knockdown and stuff as well, because better players get better at dodging hook. And there's multiple counters to bomb. There's debuff remover. There's ethereal shift. There's a lot of other stuff too. And good players also can even buy rescue beam to pull them back as soon as you hook them. So yeah, there's just a lot of counterplay against him. He's still very fun, but yeah, nonetheless. Dynamo hasn't really had that much changes for a while, but now he actually gains 14% bullet resist per boon. So he's slightly more tanky, a little bug fix. And his ult now also deals 1.5% max HP per second in the base ability instead of just having like... So they reduced the base DPS a little bit. And I think this is definitely a buff overall because that means that he's going to do 5.5% max health per tick when it's maxed. And Dynamo is and always will be the strongest team player in the game. His ult is an absolute game changer. It can turn around any Souls lead with a good ult. It's great at stealing mid-boss. He can use his basic ability to dodge tons of different abilities, including Bebop Bomb. He has a pretty strong gun damage. He just is S tier, and he always has been. All right, then we have Great Talon. Great Talon got a lot of buffs last time. Some may say a little bit too much. They now reduced his gun fall off again, and they reduced the strafe distance with stamina on Rain of Arrows, which was like one of the biggest issues in my opinion. As long as he had extra stamina, he could just like dash, 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 dash. And that was just really, really, really frustrating. And also charge shot hitbox reduced again. I believe they already did that once before. I think this puts Great Talon in a better spot. I think this definitely hurts Great Talon because his survivability is slightly worse now, but he's still in a good spot. He still has 4 stamina. His movement speed still scales with spirit. So I'm putting him in a B tier. Next up, we have Haze. Haze got some pretty controversial changes this time. Haze Bullet Dance no longer hits 2 targets, which means that I feel like Ricochet is almost mandatory. It doesn't mean that you can't hit 2 targets, but it means that it's going to do half the damage because now it has to split the bullets. So let's say you have 100 bullets, then you have to put 50 bullets on one target and 50 bullets on the other target. Before, it would do full damage to both of them. But you do get 30% more fire rates. However, they now also allow you to use items in Bullet Dance, which is a huge buff. You can now pop Unstoppable in the middle. You can use Warp Stone, Majestic Leap, and so on as well. But I do think that overall it's a nerf. I definitely think it's a nerf to the total damage output you do with Haze ult in a big fight. It makes it a little bit better in a 1v1, but it slows down Haze's like huge AoE blast potential. And honestly, I don't think Haze is that good right now. I think that there are other carries that just do things a lot better than Haze. Also, you know what? Another thing I will say, Haze is one of those heroes that will really benefit from having a big souls lead. But because of the changes to souls recently, with like a bigger percentage of souls remain in a duo lane, I also feel like it's more rare that a Haze gets really far ahead in souls, and that goes for Infernus and Seven as well, like all the hyper carry farmers. So I actually think that Haze goes down in C tier. I'm not even gonna lie. I'm not feeling Haze this patch, guys. I can't lie. All right, next up we have Infernus. Infernus got Catalyst slow reduced. Not a huge deal, I think. And then afterburn build up per bullet reduced. Well, one thing Infernus was known for was being really strong in the laning stage, where like on medium range you would be able to apply the afterburn really easily. Now it's going to be a little bit more difficult. So this just like slows down his laning power a little bit, but I don't think it like changes much on how strong the hero is as a whole. I think Infernus is in a very good spot. Probably one of the top carries in the game. He did suffer a little bit from the lifesteal diminishing return stuff a while ago, but I don't think it suffered that much for it. Just people doesn't stack that much lifesteal. But I think Infernus is a solid A tier. He still needs a lot of farm. He's a little bit squishy until he gets a lot of farm. But yeah, just the overall really, really good and strong hero. All right, then we have Ivy. Ivy got some spirit scaling changes on Covenant's Fire and Bullet lifesteal. Watcher's Covenant is the ability where you link together with a teammate. So this is kind of like makes gun Ivy stronger, but also support Ivy stronger, because you can also get that increased spirit scaling to your teammate. It also just means that you'll have a decent fire rate even when you play the spirit build. I've consistently put Ivy really high because Spirit Ivy is good, Support Ivy is good, Gun Ivy is good. And the good thing about this is that it's extremely flexible. Like even in like a tournament or something, you can have Ivy and you can like change your build depending on what's needed. You have an extremely strong ult, and one of the few ults that can just like almost instantly give you an urn. You can just fly it over super fast. And I believe that Ivy is S tier still. Also, Ivy's silence on the ult with like a huge radius is like so powerful in team fights. It's just always like annoying to play against. All right, then we have Lash. We'll do these after. Lash had some quality of life changes mostly. It was a ground strike can be cast off the zip line. It fixed the interaction between Mirage Tornado and Death Slam. I believe that is where like sometimes the tornado would have a very high hitbox. So when you're like ground slamming down, it would just cancel it, I think. And another one that is actually a pretty big buff is how ground strike now pulls enemies into the ground, just like Stoneform does with Ivy and Abrams ult as well. This is pretty big because this means that Lash is even a bigger counter against flyers. Let's say that you're a Bebop and you're ulting up in the sky or something. Lash can now jump above you and ground slam down and take you with him. So that's quite a big buff. Lash is one of the hardest heroes in the game to play, requires a lot of mobility, fairly countered by items like knockdown and slowing hex, but nonetheless a pretty good hero. I do put him in the top of B tier, I think. I still think that he's not as strong as Abrams and Infernus, for instance, and it's a little bit more situational. And when you're behind on Lash, he really just feels so useless. But Lash is that one trick hero where people who spam that hero get so good at it. But he's definitely not been the same since they removed the stamina from grapple and since they nerfed rapid recharge. He's definitely not been the same. Probably for the better though. Like, I believe that a hero being in high B tier means that the hero is in a good spot. It means that good players will take advantage of him and bad players won't be able to play well with him, which is what I think is okay. All right, next up we have Kelvin. They seem to believe Kelvin is in a good spot since they have no changes to him. Kelvin still has like such an impactful toolkit. His ult is super good for winning objectives. Like I said a while ago, they did change his ult to like freeze the mid-boss crystal, but I actually think that it makes him almost just as good as stealing the mid-boss crystal as before, because he can take it down exactly when he melees, and it also stops anyone from being able to steal the crystal. So for instance, let's say that someone jumps in and parries and tries to steal it. Well, now the crystal is frozen. And if you're like communicating with your team, then basically what happens is that your entire team will stay inside the snow globe, and then you will just kill whoever is still in it. And then Kelvin can just take down the dome, the crystal unfreezes, and you still get mid-boss. So I think Kelvin belongs in A tier. He's also very popular in tournaments. They have definitely nerfed his beam a lot, and they also nerfed his gun damage a lot, but I just think that the nature of the way the hero is designed just makes him a strong hero, even though he's been nerfed so many times. His beam build is not the same as it used to be. There's a lot of people that play him as a support or a pseudo support. There's a lot of different items you can build on him, and he has tons of mobility with the ice path too. So yeah, just a good hero overall. All right, next up we have Lady Gyat. Geist was like one of the strongest heroes in the game a few patches ago. Then they did a big nerf to Malice, and it seems like they feel like she's in a good spot now because they've had no other changes to her, which I think I agree with. The thing about Geist is that she has like one of the most annoying ults to deal with in the entire game. She also got ton of wave clear, AoE damage, a very strong silence. She's one of the heroes that are really good against Yamato, for instance, or Pocket. So she also counters a lot of the meta heroes as well. And when you buy Leech on her, she just like, I don't know, she just is, I think Lady Geist is still really strong. I think I'm gonna put her in top of B tier because I do think that the Malice nerf hurt her a lot, because the whole idea with the Malice stacking, also, not just that, but they also nerfed Mystic Reverb. So the way you used to play was that you would put Mystic Reverb on her Malice and start spamming it. And because Malice had such a long duration and a Mystic Reverb would hit everybody in an AoE, you would just like perma-slow a huge area. And since that got nerfed and Mystic Reverb only hits one target, I also think that hurts Lady Geist more than a lot of other heroes as well. Next up we have McGinnis. The turrets got nerfed quite a lot. Mini turrets DPS reduced from 60 to 40, and the health reduced from 20% to 15% of max HP. McGinnis has been very strong in quite a few patches now. Like originally the gun build was usually the one that was being used, and then people started doing the Echo Shard and turret build. And recently we've seen a lot of the Unstoppable ult build, even Majestic Leap and stuff. But the turrets really took a hit. But I will also say that the more I've watched McGinnis play and the more I have also watched tournaments and also played against and with McGinnis myself, I actually still think she's really strong. I think the wall is an incredibly strong ability when used well, especially in a team coordination. There are very few abilities where you basically can pick where you want to fight. So, and because the turret nerf only nerfs like a certain build and not necessarily the entire toolkit, I believe McGinnis belongs in A tier. McGinnis has that kind of pressure where you need to usually put like 1 or 2 people in the lane to stop her from pushing your walker. Also, McGinnis really likes to stay in the lane for quite a while. So the soul changes where there is like basically extending the laning stage and making pushing the lane more lucrative than before because jungling isn't as good as before. Also benefits McGinnis, I believe. I just think that McGinnis is really good. Speaking of really good, we have Mo and Krill. Mo and Krill, 1 patch ago, got some interesting buffs. He got headshot resistance, which makes sense because he's got a big ass head and you can also headshot the small head. Mo and Krill is just so annoying to deal with, man. The amount Mo and Krill heals in a duo lane is absurd. He seems impossible to kill. He also now keeps the burrow resistance while he's spinning, and the spin lasts for quite a while and does a lot of damage. And the ult is extremely powerful, has a lot of lockdown capabilities, and is really good against very strong heroes like Pocket, Yamato, Wraith, like very slippery heroes, and Viscous. And I think that the recent buffs to his tankiness puts him in S tier. There are very few heroes that can lock down one target as well as he does. He has also an automatic shotgun, makes him really good in the laning stage, really good throughout the entire game. Once you get Phantom Strike or maybe even a Magic Carpet and stuff, he's just really difficult to deal with and exceptional at locking down that one carry. Because some teams have this one carry that has like 10, 20k souls more than everyone else. And Mo and Krill is like the perfect hero to take down that target. All right, so there were some changes to Mirage. Bullet size reduced from 6 to 5, tornado speed reduced, and fire scabs reduced. I previously put Mirage quite low, and I probably put him a little bit too low, but he's also one of those heroes that just becomes much better in like the more organized the play is because of like his global presence. So if you're not taking advantage of the fact that his ult has like extreme split pushing potential, he's not that great in my opinion. He's still fine, but I just feel like if you take like a slice across the entire elo, I don't see a Mirage being that strong. I think that in tournaments, for instance, he's really strong. And just like other MOBAs as well, any hero with a global ult has tons of impact. But I'm still not convinced. I'm putting him here. I still think he's a good hero and some people are really good at playing him. But I'm not sold on him. The good thing about Mirage is like it's a fairly safe pick because he has Tornado, which is a strong CC. He has a global ult, which means he can join team fights wherever on the map. And because his passive does not have any range drop off, you can apply the passive from like super long range. Even though almost nobody plays the Spirit Mirage anymore, people pretty much just play gun. But nonetheless, that's kind of the case. All right, next up you have Paradox. Paradox received a lot of changes. The bullet velocity got increased. This means last hitting is easier. It means that long range shooting is easier. But the biggest nerf was the time wall no longer has charges and it no longer deals 10% max health damage on default. Now this is quite a big nerf because now you need to put 3 ability points in time wall for it to do the same thing that it did without any ability points. And that means that rapid recharge can no longer be bought to have many walls. Now I will say I think that was a little bit OP. There was a lot of people that were playing with 4 walls and just like flying around spamming walls and meleeing. And you became extremely strong in like hand-to-hand combat, baiting people into like small alleyways and like building Fortnite walls and stuff, which I don't think like makes sense as Paradox in general. I know a lot of people play like the heavy melee cancel builds and all that. I'm gonna say something that might be a little bit of a hot take, but I kind of don't think that heavy melee should be able to be cancelled with abilities because it's very unfair because only some heroes can do it. I'm completely fine with items like Fleetfoot and stuff being heavy melee cancelled, but the fact that heroes like Paradox and Abrams can do like really good heavy melee cancels with their abilities is a little bit unfair. And that's also why I think that that should be removed because that doesn't make sense with the rest of Paradox's toolkit. However, they did nerf the amp damage on Kinetic Carbine. I've been playing a lot of Paradox recently and I made 2 builds. One that is like a safe Veilwalker ultimate kind of build that is less greedy and more playing around the team, which probably is the better build for high elo. And then one which is like a Carbine Sniper because you now have more damage on Carbine and you have higher bullet velocity, it seems to me like they also are insinuating that Paradox is intended to be played more as a long-range hero, also because the swap has a very long range and the kinetic carbine has no range drop-off. So with all that being said, I think that the changes overall is a nerf, also because the ult now is much faster, and I don't think that's a buff. It's a buff in some situations. I think this means that Warpstone is not as needed because you swap so fast that the enemy doesn't necessarily have time to react to it either, so you can like dash jump out of there. The old swap made Warpstone pretty much mandatory because of how slow it was, so it's kind of like very telegraphed and everybody sees you swapping in. Now it's a little bit just happens so fast that like you can kind of get away with not having Warpstone or buying Warpstone later, depending on what the team compositions are. But I will say I still think that like it puts Paradox in a pretty good spot. I think she's just an extremely strong hero and she is everything that Bebop wants to be, which is why I've been playing more Paradox recently. And she gets better the higher up you go. The wall nerf was pretty sag. And it means that it's much harder to choose what ability points to use first. And I think this is also comp dependent because you have to get tier 3 wall to silence. So if you play against Pocket, Yamato and stuff, you have to maybe just only get 2 points in ult and carbine before you get the wall. But Paradox and Mo and Krill are the 2 heroes that can just pluck any hero out of existence. Mo and Krill stops them in their track on the spot. Paradox swaps them into a silence 50 meters further away. So after having played a lot of Paradox, I think I've finally realized that I think Paradox is S tier, even after the wall nerf. I think Paradox is really good, high skill cap, a lot of cool ways of playing the hero. And I think I've been sleeping on this hero for quite a while. I think I've also been like scared of playing her a lot just because of how high the skill cap is. There is no reason to ever have a Bebop over a Paradox if you can ever choose one. But yeah, overall, it's just a damn good hero. All right, next up we have Pocket. Pocket received some small changes. Barrage spirit scaling increased and light melee damage increased, which I find interesting because I don't think I've ever seen a Pocket melee build. I don't know if like that's gonna change anything. I doubt we're gonna see any like Pocket melee builds. Some of the abilities work really well in close combat, but then again, so does like any hero with a shotgun. I think I've constantly been saying that Pocket's one of the best heroes in the game, and I still think so, but I don't think that Pocket is S tier any longer. Just because that the more people play this game, the better people get at countering as well. So one thing I feel like is that on release, heroes like Pocket could just do whatever they wanted. And then the better people get, the more they realize that you can buy silence glyphs and knockdowns and curse. And heroes like Pocket are like extremely hurt by those kind of items. And also, to be fair, it's a hero that's like constantly been nerfed a lot. So it doesn't mean that Pocket's a terrible hero. I just think that Pocket is like at the top of A tier instead of S. But yeah. Next up, we have Vindicta. So both Vindicta and Grey Talon got like huge buffs in the previous patch, which is why everybody's been buying Knockdown now, and there's been a Vindicta and a Grey Talon every single game. And then now this is the adjustment patch. So stake duration is actually increased, but the base bullet damage has gone down a little bit. And then they put more of the damage over in the boon. So what this means is that throughout the game, you'll scale out to do the same damage, but you'll be slightly weaker early on. Another thing they did was changing the Crow Familiar tick rate. After a few seconds, the Crow Familiar is going to get a few less escalating exposure stacks compared to what it would get before. Because before it would have to wait. Every single Crow Familiar tick would also give you a escalating exposure tick. Now you're going to get slightly less, which I think makes sense because the amount of damage Crow Familiar did was just wild. Another thing they did was change Assassinate to start at 25% power instead of 50. This is also a pretty big difference, which I agree on because it felt weird to get like Omega quick scoped by a Vindicta from across the map because Assassinate hits you from anywhere. So like if you're in a duo lane, you can just fly out to the solo lane and you'll be in that lane in less than like 5 seconds and can just like snipe them from literally from like the mid boss roof. And I think it's also especially because it was very common for Vindicta to just like quick scope you in close combat. So yeah, so these nerfs are not that big for gun builds, just slightly for the early game, but overall gun builds are fairly unchanged. And I think Vindicta is still in a really good spot. I think she's a little bit more situational and a little bit more subjective to being hit by counters. A lot of knockdowns and stuff. If they buy knockdowns, you have to buy Ethereal Shift. But one thing that is very weird to me and good for Vindicta players is that if you pop Ethereal Shift in the air, it actually doesn't cancel your flight. So you can just use it to dodge knockdown and you'll still be flying. So yeah. I'm going to put Vindicta in the top of B tier. I still think she's very strong. And once again, it's the only hero that can increase souls lead by getting kills. If you max your ult, which a lot of Vindictas do early on, you can get 600 extra souls per kill. So once you ramp up some kills with Assassinate, you can snowball really hard. That's why Vindicta takes off in a lot of different games. All right, next up we have Seven. Seven is one of those heroes that is a little bit difficult to place. The ball build started to get really popular a little while ago, but his ult is just really, really bad. A few things about Seven is that like, after they nerfed the movement speed on Great Talon a little bit, Seven is now the fastest running hero in the game, right? I think he has a bigger spirit scaling on the running than Great Talon has. He has very fast farm speed still, and he has a lot of like both spirit and gun damage at the same time. He's pretty good in lane. He has that point and click stun that very few heroes have. I think that Seven is still a better carry than Haze. I just feel like Haze got butchered this patch, but I don't think Seven is as good as Infernus. I feel like there's so many games where I see a Seven have more farm than everybody else and then have like barely any objective damage, barely any hero kills, and still being squishy. And it just makes me wonder, like, is just every Seven player bad? Or is the hero just not that great? And his ult is useless. I think I'm gonna put Seven actually here. I actually don't think that Seven is that good. I don't know. Feel free to hate me in the comments, but I don't quite see what's so good about Seven, to be honest. Out of all the hyper carries, Infernus just seems like the solid winner. All right, Warden. Warden got quite some changes here. He got +1 sprint. His bullet velocity increased. He still has like the slowest gun in the game, but it's a little bit higher. Last Stand now goes on cooldown if you die or the abilities interrupt the wild cast. And it no longer grants unstoppable during channel. So now Last Stand grants 50 spirit assist during channel instead. I feel like they butchered Warden. If you take this plus the Majestic Leap changes, I just feel like that's enough to put him completely out of the meta. Like, he was strong for a little bit when he would get like, when he could reactivate Majestic Leap, when he was unstoppable during channel and stuff. And I don't know, I haven't seen a Warden with impact since this change. So I'm actually putting Warden in D tier. I know that a lot of people play Gun Warden now, but then I'm just like, but then just play another hero. Because like Ult Warden was by far the strongest build. I don't know. He's got such a slow projectile. He's okay in like a 1v1 and stuff. But I know that his fire rate scales with spirit. So he can technically cap out higher on gun damage because you could also fill out with spirit items. I just haven't seen it. I don't see why you would ever want a Warden over Infernus or McGinnis. All right, we forgot Viscous. Viscous have some interesting changes. The cube region now scales with spirit. It's a nice buff to spirit stackers. Goo Ball down dash ability moved from tier 3 to base ability, so this makes it easier to maneuver the ball without having to level it up. But the most interesting one is actually reach now affects the size of the goo ball. And we tested this. It's quite crazy. It's actually quite crazy how big the goo ball can get. And not just that, but it's been pretty common to play Magic Carpet Viscous. And Magic Carpet now also has reach on it. So Magic Carpet Viscous is even stronger as well. So this is another hero that has like an insanely high skill cap, good laning stage, good throughout the entire game. Multiple builds are good. The ball build is definitely really strong right now. And gun Viscous is really strong as well. So I'm putting him right up here, I think. I don't know. I think he's really good. All right, let me see. Wraith next. So the funny thing about Wraith was that if you guys remember way back when Shadow Weave was a vitality item and Siphon Bullets was a gun item, then Wraith was barely untouched. And then they swapped Siphon Bullets and Shadow Weave. So Shadow Weave became a gun item that gives fire rate and spirit, the two stats that Wraith wants the most. This gave birth to the Shadow Weave Tesla Bullets rush with Wraith, where you would just play like a card assassin. You would just stealth in and instantly delete people. You could even buy Curse as a second item, so you know that they have no way of running away from your ult. And after that, Wraith got nerfed about 5 times in a row. They nerfed the card scaling, and then they nerfed the card scaling again, and then they nerfed the damage of telekinesis, and then they nerfed Shadow Weave as well. So it's pretty clear that once Shadow Weave became a weapon item, that just made Wraith incredibly strong, and they keep nerfing her. But you know what? She's still goddamn good. And the reason why I think she's really good is because she can still assassinate just as well. She is one of the best solo laners. She has one of the highest power spikes at 3k souls. She has push power. She can give more fire rate to people around her as well. She has an escape tool. She has such a complete toolkit that is really hard to deal with. And I think that Wraith belongs in A tier for that particular reason. She's just really good. And it's weird because she's been nerfed so much, but yeah, I think Wraith is really strong. And the more I play against Wraith, the more I realize this. I feel like you almost have to buy Ethereal Shift when you play against Wraith, and in the laning stage, you almost have to buy a Reactive Barrier before she gets 3k souls, or you're just gonna instantly die. Next up, we have Yamato. So, Yamato received a lot of changes. A Shadow Transformation now affects grapple time speed, that's good. Duration increased from 4 to 6 seconds, but you're no longer invulnerable. It no longer prevents death, but now it gives you 60% bullet and spirit assist, and then heals you for 30%, and extends the duration by 2 seconds whenever you get a kill. However, they made a small change today where they lowered the bullet and spirit assist to 50, the heal to 25%, and the Shadow Transformation duration from 6 to 5.5 seconds. So they clearly realized that they kind of overtuned her a little bit, and they're probably monitoring these changes quite a lot because I don't think they're quite sure what they want to do with Yamato because she's very hard to balance. She is still immune to all crowd control, and now basically her ult can last for 10-12 seconds if you get kills in the ult. And you still can use the ult to dispel stuff like Bebop bombs and a lot of other things. And you can still use Refresher to pop it again and get another heal. And Yamato is just fucking busted. I'm sorry. But today, I played about 7 ranked games. Every single ranked game had the same problem. Yamato was on the enemy team and we lost because of it. Yeah. She is busted. She's a good solo laner. She's good in 1v1. Her ult dispels everything that's on her. And here's another thing that's pretty interesting, guys, is that most other heroes that can heal yourself back up can be countered by anti-heal, but not Yamato. Because when she ults, she removes all debuffs first. So even if she has heal bane and toxic bullets on her, that gets dispelled. So she will always get that 25% health heal. And when she then pops her sword slash right after, she will get another really beneficial heal that is never gonna be countered by anti-heals in time because she just dispelled it. So add row above. There we go. Okay. And then we finally have Shiv. I think Shiv is in a pretty good spot. He is also one of those heroes who've just gotten so many nerfs. I think out of all the heroes on release, Shiv was the most busted when he first came out. His dagger did more damage than pocket ult, but it got nerfed a few hours later. And after that, Shiv has pretty much been just getting nerfed and 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 nerfed a lot. Until recently, they started to like rebalance his kit a little bit. And then some idiot streamer named AverageJonas decided to make a melee Shiv build a while ago. And then That became the meta like a few weeks later after people used it in a tournament. And a lot of people still play melee Shiv, but there's much more melee item counters now. And he's also very susceptible to anti-heal items. And I still think that he is much weaker than Abrams just because he doesn't have any crowd control. So Abrams and Shiv, they kind of fill a similar role in a team, except that Shiv doesn't really lock down heroes that well. He kind of relies on being ahead in souls. He's excellent at dueling heroes when he is ahead in souls, especially because of his passive, even though they nerfed the passive quite a lot as well. He completely relies on being ahead. When he's not ahead, he is very, very, very useless. And I think that's also one big difference between Shiv and Abrams, is that Abrams can always stun with his ult. He can always stun with shoulder charge. He can always get a free unstoppable whenever he ults. So I think Shiv belongs in the top of B tier. And I think that's where he should be. I think if Shiv gets too many buffs, then the game becomes incredibly unfun to play. And I think it's a hard hero to balance because he has a passive that takes some of the burst damage and turns it into damage over time. That makes it very difficult to balance, but I think he's in a good spot where good players use him and bad players, they just get parried. And before you say melee doesn't work, you'll just get parried, there's so much behind melee combat. There is melee baiting, there is parry baiting, you can use fleet foot to animation cancel your heavy melees. There's so much stuff you can do. So just because you play melee builds doesn't mean that you're dumb. However, Abrams is the one hero that can avoid all of this because he has guaranteed melees with his shoulder charge unless you buy debuff reducer. Once you buy debuff reducer, the stun from the shoulder charge will be too short and you can once again parry. So yes, that was my tier list. If you enjoyed this content, feel free to leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. I know a lot of Warden mains are gonna hate me now, and that's okay. It's clear that Valve doesn't care about you, so why should I? And I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.